Hey guys, this is Kevin Cam with Precision Powerlifting Systems. I'm joined by the one and only Jay Birdie, who's actually laying on the floor making cat noises when I came in. So I'm not sure if she's completely with us or not today, but she's here anyways. So what I want to go over today is I want to go over deliberate practice. So I did a video about explaining myelin and how that insulated wrapping around our neurons, it increases the firing rate and it increases the efficiency of how our body fires those neurons, so our movements are quicker, faster, less noise in them, there's more force behind them, all of those things. So I kind of want to bring this into practical application because our programs utilize deliberate practice in their writing of them so that we can kind of take advantage of this myelin piece that I talked about in the last video. So again, just to kind of summarize the myelin, in order to develop it, you have to have attention and focus and be aware in the training session itself. So you got to be present in the moment and paying a lot of attention to it because it is very costly energy-wise to build more myelin. And it's living tissue. So your body needs it to be stressed out in order to build more of it. And if you don't do it, right, so you do it for a little bit of time, but then you take a break, the same thing that would happen with like muscle atrophy would happen with this aspect of it. It's living tissue, so it builds up and it dies out. So you need to constantly stress it in order to keep producing more of it, just like you would in any muscle group within your body training-wise. So what we need to do in training is we need to bring an attention and a focus into each training session, but we also need to understand that errors are part of the process. You need to fuck up in order to get better. If you don't fail, you don't learn. So typically what I think you see with a lot of programs is it's mostly just like mindless repetitions. You come in, you check a box, you do this amount of work at this average intensity, and then you leave, right? There's really no attention and focus being delivered into that training process. And that's fine. That'll get you strong up into a point, but that's how you just build average results, right? So it's like any new task when you first start at it, there's beginner gains. But in order to get past those beginner gains, you need to bring a little bit more mindset, awareness, and focus into each training session in order to produce more myelin, to be able to get more higher level output. And everybody is capable of getting higher level output. Now, not everybody's going to be a world champion, but everybody can qualify for nationals. That should be at least a bare minimum of what people can do. I don't care how high the totals are in the USAPL to qualify for nationals. Everybody's capable of that level of success. They just need to be doing the things right in training, and they need to focus on the right aspects of training to build enough myelin in order to be more of a higher level expert type of in the field, right? Because it's the top, whatever, 5-10%, whatever it is. But everybody has that ability to do it. They just have to do it the right way in order to get there. The majority of people don't get there because there's a reason why average is average. The average person is just going to check that box, and then they're going to wonder why they're not getting better, and then they're going to go away and they'll blame it on their genetics or some other fucking bullshit instead of their work ethic and actually learning how to train. So this video, I'm going to explain our program, how we utilize deliberate practice. I'm going to explain how to actually train when you're partaking in any sport. And this even like extends beyond sports. This should be for your job, for your family life, whatever it is, this still applies. Wow. So for deliberate practice, right? Like I was saying, you need that extra attention, that focus to detail, and you need to make errors. So you need to be able to analyze your weaknesses, pick one thing to focus on, get immediate feedback upon focusing on that one thing, and figure it out. And over time, as you keep doing that, you develop more myelin and you develop greater levels of skill. There's a reason why also that in order to be high level at anything, it takes a lot of time. And it takes a lot of time paying attention to these things. Like we take for granted that even like LeBron James went into the NBA at 19 years old, but he was playing basketball from the time he was 5 years old. Tiger Woods, same thing. It took him into his early 20s to win his first major. There's videos of him being under 3 years old swinging a golf club. So they put a lot of time, a lot of focus, a lot of energy into these aspects. And I think people make the mistake sometimes too because they associate fun in training to be motivated to have high levels of success. And that's not necessarily true. When you actually interview a bunch of experts, not a lot of them identify their training as fun. but there's other motivational factors that continue to drive them forward. And I've actually kind of implanted these into our training process as well. It's kind of these like, and I'll explain these like little fake environmental cues that can help deliver motivation. It doesn't always work because people have to be involved in the whole process. They have to understand the process and they have to follow the rules of the process. But what's really tough is changing behavior, where you get a lot of people who just focus on those external outcomes. Or week 1 of a max effort lift, they're going to an RPE 10, and then there's really nowhere to build momentum and stuff. So our programs, the way that they are built up, the way that they are written, so we go week 1, 2, 3, and 4 in a wave, okay? So phases 1 and 2, we have max effort squat. We'll just do max effort lift, right? So phase 1, we do max effort squats day 1, max effort bench on day 2, okay? Actually, you know what? We'll write it all out. Max squat, max effort bench, okay? Week 2, we then get reps, percentage of max effort for squat and bench. Week 3, we get max effort, trying to beat what we did week 1 by 5 pounds, and then we get kind of like a deload recheck period here, okay? So week 1, what you need to do too, this can't always be comp lifts. One, it's extremely hard to recover from if it's a comp lift, just because the absolute loads are so high, right? So if you look at any like weightlifting program, their heavy singles tend to be between like 85 and 92%, and that's kind of how I've made our max effort lifts, is so that we use a variation that kind of puts you absolute load wise 85 to 92% of your 1 rep max, but you're getting the strain that you would get under closer to 100% of your 1 rep max. So week 1, if I give a lifter a variation, there's a lot of things that they have to pay attention to, right? So a box squat, you got to sit back more than you do in a comp squat, so the movement might be a little bit different. We might be using a different bar, so how it feels on your back and how you have to kind of engage the movement and the feedback you're going to get from the bar is going to be different. I can change and make them be more aware of their force output. So a typical raw squat, you hit the hole and you kind of explode and then you coast to the top, because the velocity at the top has to be 0. So there's deceleration that happens on the way up. If I put bands and chains on there, that force is distributed with the load on your back or on a bench press or deadlift or whatever in a different manner that makes you pay attention in a different manner and makes you react in a different manner, and your force output needs to coincide with it in order to execute the lift. So if you give somebody variations, and of course, these variations should be guiding them to fix a skill or to improve upon a skill that they already possess or that they need to improve upon, right? So if somebody needs to sit back more in a squat, that's where the box squat, they need to build their hips. Box squat also helps build your hips, helps you be more explosive out of the bottom. So there's all these tools that develop these physical features. It's not just thinking about skill as a neurological process. It's a neurophysiological process. So there's bottom up and top down stuff that's happening. So they go in, they're doing the max effort lift day 1, and they got to pay attention. It's really hard the first time you get a variation to max out in it, right? So this forces a few things. One, it forces them to make good decisions because they don't know where they're going to be at for total weight at the end of the day. So it forces them to pay attention rep to rep and make decisions of what to do next, right? So it forces them to be engaged in the training process by doing that, number 1. Number 2, it forces them to be engaged because sometimes the movements are awkward or they feel different. So it catches your attention when that happens, and it makes them kind of pay attention to the movement and try to figure it out. So the variation and doing it heavy enough, it forces the lifter to be present in a training session. And of course, some who are naturally engaged, you add that natural engagement to the engagement that's coming from the variation, you're just getting a lot more positive results, right? That's a lot of energy being devoted to this one training day. That's how you build more myelin. If you're just doing a comp lift at RPE light and then just doing some back downs because you're trying to check some box of volumes and average intensities to complete, and you're not bringing with yourself that engagement in the training process itself, you're not building more myelin. You'll get up to a certain point. I've used this analogy a few times. It's like baking bread. The first few times you do it, you kind of are figuring it out. And then once you kind of figure it out, you can't just keep baking bread to get better at it, right? So I think I used tennis, an example of tennis with you in the previous video, right? Like you can hit a ball with your friends, but you're only going to get up to a certain level doing that. At some point, you need to be more engaged in the process, discover strengths and weaknesses, identify those weaknesses, and focus on 1 to 2 of them at a time until they get better, and then kind of that process keeps going on and on. You need to be engaged in the process. So if you're just coming in and you're just checking a box of doing competition lifts, it's only going to get you so far. There's a reason why average is called average. It's only going to get you to average results doing something like that. So if you already have a good mindset about being engaged and you understand the training process, you appreciate it, you look forward to it, you have a focus and attention in it, and then you have an exercise that forces you to do those things, like there's a lot of energy going in there to build that myelin to make higher levels of skill. All right, so you do week 1, you get to a top set, you see some breakdown in technique. So you're analyzing it, you're like, okay, this is the one glaring thing that I need to focus on next week when I get reps to really fix, to make better, so that I can come back week 3 and I can beat what I did week 1 by 5 pounds, okay? So you have to lift heavy enough in order to see that breakdown. So you see that breakdown, you have that focus and attention to come in on week 2, you take videos of every set, you pay attention to it, right? You get the immediate feedback of watching your video, your training partner or your coach being there. They're giving you that feedback, you're getting better set to set, you build upon. You're attacking a weakness that you saw week 1, and then you come back week 3 for a max effort lift, you beat it by 5 pounds. Now, one of the things that I do here is I tell them on week 1 to leave 5 to 10 pounds on the bar. So think of it as a hard second, easy third. Now, the reason for this is that sometimes it's just smoke and mirrors, right? So the reason that I do that with them is so that there's room here so that we can almost always hit a PR on week 3. Right, so this is that built-in momentum into the program. It's just, again, it's just smoke and mirrors. You hit a 5-pound PR, you get excited, you get motivation to go into the next block, right? That's literally the whole point of losing. I mean, there's a recovery cost. You know, you're going RPE 10 week 1, there's a recovery cost to that, for sure. But, you know, we are taking it easy. We could take it even easier, and then we could come back and try to beat it and really go RPE 10 all the time. But leaving some wiggle room, improving upon it, hitting a 5-pound PR and making it look better, there's a lot of momentum there. So it's this built-in environmental cue that just gets people engaged, excited to train, and so on. And then during our deload, we might take like 80% for doubles or triples or something like that. So we're doing our comp lifts, we're putting enough weight on there so that we can kind of really analyze the performance and stuff. And we're just seeing how our choices of exercises are improving the lifts themselves. I don't necessarily care. So like, I want this to improve over a macro cycle more than I care about each mesocycle. So at the end of each mesocycle, there's this, right? So every 4 weeks we do this. So, you know, let's say we go through 6 months and finally we're on that 4 weeks, 6 months later. Hopefully, maybe they started 80% for 4 doubles, but now they're doing 85% for 4 triples, and it just looks a lot better and crisper, and you're seeing a lot of improvement in strength and technique and all of that stuff. So it's this recheck process that just kind of keeps our decision making in check and allows us to see what's working and what's not working. Because it's not just you set your mind right, you go into the gym and everything's fine. There are physiological pieces that need to be taken into consideration with this. There are recovery costs. You know, powerlifting is a sport that you can get away with a little bit less skill and utilize higher levels of brute strength. And I think you see this all of the time. You see lifters come in and they do achieve high levels of success in what seems like a short amount of time. But once you start talking to them, it's like, when did you start lifting for the first time? Oh, I had my first weight set in my basement when I was 10 years old, right? So there's stuff that they've done, or they've done gymnastics or played other sports where maybe they had strength and conditioning in college. They played football and have been lifting weights since high school, and now in their early 20s, they're achieving world level success in the sport. They've always put time in, and that brute strength can kind of mask some levels of skill at some point, but at some point, that lack of skill is going to catch up. So, you know, you do need to pay attention to those physiological pieces of training. So when you're identifying weaknesses, it's not just as easy as just doing the lift, seeing something break down, focusing on that breakdown the following week, getting the immediate feedback from from your training partner, your coach, yourself from filming your own sets, coming back, hitting the 5-pound PR. That's not the whole thing, right? So if the breakdown, your knees are caving in and you're falling forward. All right, well, we need to build up the low back, the hips, the hamstrings, right? So the good mornings become extremely important here, right? Or, you know, as the weight gets heavier in the bench press, your elbows are flaring, the bars going over your face. All right, that close grip bench, the floor press, the incline press, like those things we need to really pay attention to and really build up here. We need to add in the triceps, right? So really those like JM press and those other big tricep exercises, we need to focus on to build those physical areas, right? So like when you think of skill adaptation, it's a two-way street. There's top down and then there's bottom up. So that bottom up is that sensory information. So our muscles are telling our brain certain amounts of information, how much force to apply, how much force they're capable of applying, how fast to apply that force. Our awareness of our body in space, there's sensory information that's coming back up to our brain. So we can't see the bar in our back. And there's a point, if you're following the bar down to your chest, you're gonna round your upper back. So you gotta stare at the ceiling. So at some point you're losing sight of the barbell on the bench press. On the deadlift, you can't see if your head's up. So you have to rely on a lot of this bottom-up feedback from the barbell athlete system itself in order to update your brain. So you need to be aware within the training process of the things that are happening, right? So like for me today, I'm gonna use the cambered bar without a box, right? So because of how much the bar swings, it supplies a lot of sensory feedback. So I just think it makes you a lot more receptive to that sensory feedback, more than maybe building up some physiological pieces or some physical pieces. But either way, it probably does both. And that's a really important aspect of that exercise itself, I think, is just developing that sensory feedback so you know where you are in space, you can make the adjustments, and you can get that immediate feedback. So if you want higher rep sets, and this is where I kind of ran into problems before. So I think singles are great because they're very sport specific, but doubles, triples, fours, fives, people have always said that those can be very beneficial to increasing technique. And I don't disagree with that. It's just a lot of times the first one looks good, the second one looks a little worse, third one sucks, fourth one sucks, fifth one sucks. But part of that is just the person's inability to get that sensory feedback, that bottom-up feedback, and be able to make those rep-to-rep adjustments. So I think something like a cambered bar or throwing variations in. So like if we're doing a safety squat bar, box squat with chains or something week 1, and then we're getting percentage of that in reps and a lot of reps with it week 2, it just kind of helps you develop that bottom-up feedback, learning how to do it. And all of a sudden, you know, something clicks, you're halfway through the sets, you're like, oh, I'm starting to get this. And then you start feeling it more. And like, that's how you learn, right? That's how a baby learns how to walk. You fall over, get up, kind of stumble around, fall over, get up, stumble around. Eventually you see, you know, high level athletic performance on the fields on Sundays or NBA courts or wherever it is, doing very high level performance things, but all of them fell over as a baby. So like figuring out that your body just kind of updating that information system from the bottom up, from the top down, and your brain just pre-planning a motor strategy in order to execute it at a high level. But again, it's very costly to do these things, right? So you need to be present in a training session, have attention, have focus on it, understand the reasons why, and you need to do what you're supposed to do. Get that immediate feedback, try to make changes, be engaged, understand where the weaknesses lie. It's not just getting through your lifts and then just walking away and just half-assing your accessory work. The good mornings in some cases are more important than the squat because it puts you at angles. It helps, you know, that information, that bottom-up information that's being sent to your brain. You know, in that case, if your knees are caving in and your chest is falling forward, you know, the feedback that your brain's getting is, yo, my low back and my hamstrings are weak as shit, so you got to do this in order to execute the lift. But over time of building up those areas, that information updates. And eventually that bottom-up information is like, hey, the hamstrings are ready, the low back's ready. Let's start putting some weight on this bar. And then you can start manipulating the physics a little bit, right? So you can start moving somebody's feet a little wider on the bench. Maybe they can arch more, on the squat. Maybe they can arch more on the bench. Maybe they now can use a wider grip on the bench or whatever it is. Maybe they're getting their hips and their low back are getting stronger. So now they can pull more sumo, right? So like that distance that the bar has to travel matters. And I think in a lot of cases, when you look at individualization of training, if somebody likes to be in those other places, yeah, they might be stronger, but just focusing on strengths and redefining strengths all of the time, that's only going to get you so far. The point of deliberate practice is to find weaknesses, to fuck up a bunch of times, and to learn from those mistakes. And as you do that, that's literally how you build more myelin. You need to actually fail in order to succeed based on the physiological process of building more myelin in the brain. You cannot do that just succeeding all the time. So if you give somebody a program where everything's light and they, you get don't miss reps in training, whatever, right? Yes, there's probably some benefit to that, but somebody like Ed Cohn would have been good on any program that he did because he probably brings that mental focus, attention to detail, and all those things into training anyways. He doesn't have to be forced to do those things, right? But at the same time, I'm guaranteeing you he missed reps in training and he trained a lot harder on the comp lifts than what maybe the things he says lead people to believe. He didn't just do submaximal work all the time. But if you set somebody up where they never fail, they're not going to build more myelin. There's not a reason to. You're not forcing the body to have to adapt to that increased stimulus. So in the stimulus, it's not just physical. It's not just about volumes and average intensities. It's about learning how to coordinate movement in a high level of efficiency in order to improve performance. The brain plays a role in all of this. How much force is being applied, how quickly that force is being applied. These are all in that pre-planned motor strategy, right? There's a cognitive piece of movement. If we just waited till we hit the bottom of a squat to know how much force to apply, it'd be too late. The weight would always win because gravity's already on pushing you down. So it has to be pre-planned. There has to be this pre-planning process. And in order to do that, you need to set the system up right to pre-plan the best strategies to do those things. So if you're just going through the motions, that is not enough energy for your body to build that myelin to actually set up the best environment in order for you to have the highest levels of success. But there's a reason why the majority of people do not get to those highest levels of success. There's a reason why average is average. And it's because the average person doesn't want to do those things that are necessary in order to get those results. They complain when they miss a rep. They kick fucking rocks. They complain about how hard training is. They're on their phones, texting, Instagramming in between sets. They're not focused or engaged in the task itself. They're devoting a lot of energy within their training system to a bunch of other things. And you need to set up an environment to appreciate errors, to look forward to them, to learn from them, to focus on them, and to really build them up. Like your training session, powerlifting's easy. You're training 4 days a fucking week for an hour and a half. That's not that big of a commitment. It's 10 hours a week. And you can devote that amount of time to being focused in all of those things. But if you understand that our programs are written in a specific way based off of deliberate practice, but you're going in and you think just hitting a max effort lift, half-assing your accessories, fucking around with your friends the following week, swiping right on Tinder in between sets, swiping left to whatever's out there, who knows. But you're not going to hit the highest levels of success that you can. Everybody has the ability to be above average, but most people will just fall into those categories and they end up being average. They'll blame the program and be like, I need a higher frequency, higher volume program. But basically, every program when you switch tends to work for a very small amount of time. And the whole reason for that is it probably just makes you pay attention differently and you're a little bit more motivated when it goes. But all of those things are going to pass over time. So like I've known plenty of lifters that have jumped from coach to coach, and each time they jumped from a coach to another coach, they saw small levels of success, whatever. But then there's this point where it doesn't matter who coaches them, what program they do, they've reached that point where they've just developed that baseline level, and until they bring a different mindset into training, they'll never be above average. And in order to be above average, our programs are set up to be that way based off of they're not principles, but based off of the theory of deliberate practice. So again, just to like summarize, you're figuring out week one, analyze your results, find one thing to focus on, bring that attention and focus into week two, get the immediate feedback from the filming of your sets so that you know where the errors are, you're getting better set to set, bring that, what you've learned into that week three, hit that 5-pound PR. There's your little pat on the back and your little motivation to keep fucking going. And then understand that week four is there just so that we can see how everything's working on a bigger scale, right? And to kind of help us make sure that we're doing the right things. And it's just this checking process to make sure we're not getting too far away from where we should be going with things, okay? We leave 5 to 10 pounds on the bar, so a hard second, easy third on week 1, so that we can build that momentum. That momentum is really important in order to keep training fresh, wanting to go. If you come in, Jess did this last week or the week before, hit an RPE 10, you do reps the following week, and then you lift less week 3 because there's nowhere to go for it. And there was a distraction in the training, so she didn't even have the attention and focus from it, and then you lose that momentum, right? So now you get into this week and it's just kind of like, okay, now it becomes more of a deload, reset the mindset, but then you get an opportunity to come back, to learn from those mistakes, to come back week 1 and be like, okay, I'm gonna make better choices. I'm gonna learn from my choices from the previous block. I'm going to make better choices. And then I'm going to pay more attention and not be distracted by having this plan in place. So it's not that it's bad that those things happen. It's usually a good thing because it teaches you those things, but it's only a mistake if you do it twice. So if you come back and you make those mistakes again, you're not getting the most out of the training process that you should be. You're just checking boxes. And that will lead to average levels of success. So that's how our programs are built around the idea, the theory of deliberate practice and skill acquisition, as opposed, now I do have recommended volumes and intensities that I want people to get to. Like, there is a certain amount of work that you need to accumulate in order to have high levels of success. But if somebody doesn't have focus or attention, or they're not focused in it and they don't have that attention on their recovery or other aspects, or their lives are super stressed, whatever it is, there are other aspects that are going to negatively influence that. So for us, we need to find a way to be able to get the highest level of practice with those recommended volumes, not just checking a box. You are better off leaving the gym instead of just doing more just to say you did those reps, because now there's a higher recovery cost with a fraction, if not a negative reward at that point. So there's much more risk than there is reward to be doing stuff like that. So it's really important that people are honest with themselves, and that if they truly want something, you got to be accountable for your own actions. Every program is basically fine that's probably out there, right? Like, if they've had people that have had high levels of success on the program's fine. So if you're not seeing success on it, the problem probably lies within yourself. Not having the right mindset coming into training, not understanding the training process, and being too focused on the external outcomes of training itself. That's all I got. You got questions, Jess?
No.
You sure? All right. You can follow me on Instagram as KWKN, our team, Precision Powerlifting Systems. Jess doesn't want you to follow him. At JBirdie.
Good.